Have you ever felt like God was asking you to step into something that felt bigger than you? A new season, a new responsibility, a new calling. Something that sounds beautiful when other people talk about it, but when it becomes your reality, it suddenly feels heavy. Because deep down, you know what it could cost. You know the uncertainty. You know the pressure. You know the possibility of failure. And if you're honest, sometimes the fear is not even about the task itself. It's about the question quietly sitting underneath it all. What if I'm not enough for what God is asking me to do? Maybe you felt that recently. Maybe God has been stirring something in your heart. A dream, a calling, a step of obedience. And instead of excitement, you feel hesitation. Not because you don't love God, but because you know your own weaknesses. You know your fears. You know your limitations. And sometimes, that awareness can become so loud that it keeps you standing still. There's a moment in Scripture that speaks directly into this kind of fear. It happens in Joshua chapter 1. Moses, the great leader of Israel, is gone. The man who led people through impossible moments, the man who spoke with God face to face, is no longer there. And now Joshua stands in the middle of transition. Can you imagine the weight of that moment? An entire nation looking to him, an impossible assignment ahead of him, and behind him, the shadow of someone people considered greater. Joshua is not stepping into something small. He is stepping into responsibility, into uncertainty, into leadership, into a future he cannot fully see. And maybe that's why God speaks to him the way he does, not with condemnation, not with pressure, but with reassurance. Moses, my servant, is dead. Now then, you and all these people, get ready to cross the Jordan River. Joshua 1:2. Notice what God says, get ready to cross, not stand still, not wait until you feel fearless, not come back when you feel qualified. Move forward. And maybe someone listening today needs to hear that exact thing. Move forward. Not because you feel fully prepared, but because God is with you. Fear has a way of convincing us that we need certainty before obedience. But faith does not work that way. Faith moves, even when all the details are not visible yet. And I think sometimes we imagine biblical figures as fearless people, but Scripture shows us something different. They were human. They struggled. They doubted. They wrestled with fear. Joshua likely did too, because God repeats something to him again and again throughout this passage. Be strong and courageous. Joshua 1:6. Be strong and very courageous. Joshua 1:7. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Joshua 1:9. When God repeats something multiple times, it matters. And maybe God repeated it because Joshua needed reminding, because courage is not the absence of fear.
It is choosing to move forward despite it. That changes everything, because many people are waiting to feel courageous before they act. But courage often comes after obedience begins, not before. Think about that for a moment. Joshua still had enemies ahead, still had uncertainty ahead, still had responsibility ahead. But God was teaching him something deeper. You do not need to carry the future by yourself. And honestly, that may be one of the greatest sources of exhaustion in our lives. Trying to carry what only God can carry. Trying to control outcomes. Trying to guarantee success. Trying to eliminate uncertainty. But God never asked Joshua to control the outcome. He asked him to trust and obey. And maybe that's where you are right now. Trying to figure everything out before taking the next step. Trying to make sure nothing goes wrong. Trying to avoid discomfort. But what if clarity comes through movement, not before it? There's something powerful about the Jordan River in this story. because the river stood between Israel and the promise. And often in life, there is something standing between us and where God is calling us to go. Fear, doubt, insecurity, past failures, sometimes even comparison. And comparison can quietly destroy courage, because you start looking at other people and thinking, they're more gifted, they're more prepared, they're more confident. And suddenly your focus shifts from God's calling to your limitations. But God never told Joshua to compare himself to Moses. He simply told him to obey. That matters, because comparison keeps you trapped in someone else's story, while obedience moves you into your own. And maybe today, God is not asking you to become someone else. Maybe He is asking you to finally trust Him enough to become who He created you to be. But let's be honest, moving forward in faith can feel uncomfortable. Because faith stretches you. It asks you to step beyond what feels safe. And that tension between safety and obedience is where many dreams die. Not because God failed, but because fear convinced people to stay where they were. Yet Joshua 1 verse 9 says, "Do not be terrified, do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go." Wherever you go. Not just in easy seasons, not just when you feel confident, not just when everything makes sense. Wherever. That means God's presence is not dependent on your perfection, and that is deeply comforting. Because sometimes we think we need to have everything together before God can use us. But throughout Scripture, God consistently works through imperfect people who are willing to trust Him. Moses struggled with insecurity. David had failures. Peter made mistakes. Yet God still worked through them. Not because they were flawless, but because they were willing. And willingness matters more than perfection. So maybe the question today is not, am I completely ready? Maybe the real question is, am I willing to trust God with the next step? Because most of the time, God does not reveal the entire path at once. He gives daily guidance, daily strength, daily grace. Psalm 119 verse 105 says, "Your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path." Notice it says lamp, not stadium lights, not a full blueprint. A lamp. A lamp light for the next step. And maybe that's why faith requires dependence. Because if we saw the entire journey immediately, we might rely more on ourselves than on God. But when we trust Him step by step, our relationship with Him deepens, our confidence in Him grows, and slowly, what once felt terrifying becomes possible. Not because the challenge disappeared, but because our trust became stronger than our fear. So today, if you've been standing still because you feel afraid, hear this clearly. Fear does not mean God has abandoned you. Sometimes fear simply means you are standing at the edge of growth. Joshua still had to cross the Jordan. He still had to move. But he did not move alone, and neither do you. God is with you in the uncertainty, with you in the stretching, with you in the waiting, with you in the next step. And maybe the breakthrough you're praying for is waiting on the other side of obedience. So take the step, even if your voice shakes, even if your confidence feels small, even if you do not have every answer yet. Take the step. Because courage is not about feeling fearless. It is about believing God is greater than what you fear. And one day, you may look back and realize, the season that once scared you was the very season God used to transform you. If this message spoke to you today, take a quiet moment and ask yourself, What step of faith have I been avoiding? And then ask God for courage to move forward, just one step at a time. And if you want more faith-based encouragement and motivational stories rooted in Scripture, subscribe to Inspire and Believe TV, because sometimes the life God is calling you into begins with one courageous step of obedience. And remember, you do not have to be fearless to move forward. You only need to trust the God who goes with you.